Welcome to JW Updates on World News. My name is Vern, and today we will be looking at no more clergy privilege, says the NSS. And Jehovah's Witnesses and the Catholic Church, they both want it. So that's what this is really about. It's about clergy privilege, among other things. And in case you don't know who the NSS is, we're going to the UK. This is a group in the UK that is, and we're going to talk about them and how their organization is structured. So on today's program, I'll just get her up on the small screen here. Thanks to watching the Watchtower for this news. And this is the latest one that we'll be covering. It's from August 7th, 2023. And this is from the National Secular Society. And no religious loopholes for reporting abuse. NSS warns the government. So that'll be the news that we're covering. Now, like me, you may want a little bit of a backstory. So we're going to take a look at who the NSS is, what secularism is, and we're going to take a look at their main page, play their little 1-minute video. Then we're going to look at religious privilege undermines abuse. And this was done by the same group back in August of 2016. So they've been working on this. This is strictly Jehovah's Witness or two-witness rule, this particular document. And that's back in 2016. And then we're going to look at what they are asking the government to do regarding this sexual abuse in CSA reporting. And this one is fairly recent. It's May 24th, 2023. And it's called NSS, Government Commitments on Abuse May Not Go Far Enough. So we're going to cover all of this information. If this is brand new to you, well, then you may want to stay on for the whole program. If you're just looking for the news, we're going to cover that right off the bat. So let's get into the news here, and I'm going to move us to a little different screen so that you guys can follow along with me. So this is the latest news from the NSS, and they're reporting on the reporting laws. So the NSS has told the Home Office that it must resist religious lobbying for sacramental confession. And that's what this is all about. So during the sacramental confession, which is held by the Catholic Church and other Christian denominations, an individual reports their sins privately to a priest and asks for forgiveness. And in countries including Ireland and Australia, the Catholic Church has resisted these laws, which would require a priest who heard disclosures of child sexual abuse during confession to report the incidents to the authorities, so the priests don't have to report. So the NSF said there is ample evidence that many disclosures of the CSA have been made in confession, which, if acted on, could have prevented subsequent abuse. So, if we don't deal with the abusers right away, well, then they just keep on abusing. And this is proven true in these religions. So research has found that the sexual abusers within the Catholic clergy have used confession to disclose their abuse and absolve themselves of guilt in knowledge that their abuse would not be reported. So the priests themselves are using this loophole, and they're abusing young children, the priests themselves. All over the world we're finding this. And as Jehovah's Witnesses, we were proud that our religion was not a part of this. Now, I quit the religion in 2012. If I hadn't quit, I would certainly be quitting today, knowing that the religion is on equal grounds with the Catholic Church, Babylon the Great. So it goes on to say this enabled the continuation of the abuse, in all these religions. Excuse me. Dynamics in other religious institutions may affect their willingness to report child sex abuse, the NSS warned. So this includes the Jehovah's Witness two-witness rule, and we're going to look at the two-witness rule, in which elders of a congregation will only act if there are two witnesses to any sin committed, including abuse. And this is a big problem in the Jehovah's Witness religion. So the NSS expressed concern that the government does not appear to have accepted their recommendations to abolish the 3-year time limit. So So in some countries, there's still a time limitation on reporting. I believe in Canada and in some parts of the U.S. that time limit has been extended. So the NSS said other reframes are necessary to protect children in religious settings, including the schools, compulsory for children to go to school. Now, I agree with that because here in Canada, even we have all these different schools. Some are religious. We have the Catholic School Board, the Protestant School Board. It's confusing for the taxpayer. And then we have the Hutterites. They have their own school, and this is all being provided for by tax-paying money. And I think all over the world, we would like more of a fair system where it's okay for everyone to get educated. And then it goes on to say ensuring that all schools, including faith schools, teach sex education. Now, Jehovah's Witness a lot of times will pull their kids out of those classes because they feel that they don't want their kids to learn from the world. But yet we have all these problems in school, in the congregation, the cover-ups. You see, if the kids were going to sex education, they would know to speak out about the cover-ups. Maybe they would go talk to a school counselor. And this has happened. So the review of advancement of religious charitable purposes. So that's the other thing. All these religions are getting tax breaks, they're getting charity benefits and everything. It's costing the taxpayer billions of dollars all over the earth. We're paying billions of dollars. So again, we want this to stop. Why are we paying billions of dollars to religions that cover up child abuse and abuse children and they don't have any measures to protect them? So the NSF is going after the government to ensure that religious privilege does not undermine mandatory reporting laws. And so their lawyers done a campaign on this. And he's saying the close ties to the state, differential attitudes, and prioritizing institutional reputation over the rights and well-being of children have all enabled child sexual abuse in religious settings. And this is what they're demanding, is the government must ensure religious privilege does not undermine any new legal duties to report suspected child sexual abuse, and no matter how hard some churches may lobby for exemptions. The consultation closes Monday, the 14th of August, and responses can be submitted here. So we'll put a link to this article here. This is the newest one. Now, in case you're not sure who the NSS is, we're going to play this little video here, and it'll tell you a little bit more about their movement.
Do you think that religion should be a personal choice, not something that's ever imposed on people? So do we. This idea is called secularism. It's the principle that the state should stay neutral on matters of religion, to ensure that no faith receives unfair privileges. In a secular society, the state is kept separate from the church, and religious viewpoints aren't given preferential treatment. Citizens are free to believe or not to believe in any faith they wish. In a diverse society like ours, where people hold many different beliefs, secularism ensures that everyone's rights and freedoms are balanced fairly. At the National Secular Society, we've been challenging religious privilege for over 150 years. During that time, we've been at the forefront of many important social reforms, such as women's equality, LGBT rights, and the abolition of blasphemy laws. But religion still enjoys significant privileges. Despite Christians now being a minority in the UK, the Church of England still holds its established status as a national church. Its bishops are granted automatic seats in the House of Lords, allowing them to vote on laws which affect us all. A third of all state-funded schools are faith schools, which are allowed to discriminate against families who don't share their religion. Acts of worship are still required by law in all schools, even non-religious ones. And rising religious fundamentalism is threatening our most basic democratic values, such as freedom of speech. A diverse society doesn't have to mean a divided one. And whatever your beliefs, secularism protects you. Join us in our stand for equality, freedom, and fairness. Become a member of the National Secular Society today.
Well, there you have it. So we see that this group is really trying to separate the governments from the religions. And there's so many religions. How do you, as a government, how do you cater to all these religions? And it mentioned a third of the schools are faith-based. So now we're having to split up our taxpayers' money. It doesn't make sense. So this has to stop, especially with the cover-ups and some of the abuses that religions are getting away with in the time that we're living in. Now, we're going to move on here to what these guys are saying about religious privilege undermines abuse victims. And again, I speak to our Jehovah's Witness community because I was one, and when I think of this kind of stuff out in the news, it's really quite sickening because it's putting the Jehovah's Witness in the same position as the Catholics. And all over the world, this is what's happening. This abuse is being covered up by religions, and it's getting exposed. So this is an older article. It goes back to 2016, and we'll get right into it. Richard Scorer, a specialist child abuse lawyer at Slater and Gordon, draws attention to organizations seeking more lenient treatment over child abuse-connected matters because they are religious, and makes the case for no concessions being given. So this is that clergy penitent privilege that this lawyer is up against. So he goes on to say, which is more important, religious freedom or safeguarding children from abuse? And should churches and religious organizations be exempt from secular standards of child protection? What do you think as the audience? If you're a Jehovah's Witness, what do you think? Well, 2 recent court cases involving the Jehovah's Witnesses raises this issue in the starkest form. Some background. Over the past 2 decades, a significant number of abuse cases have emerged in the Jehovah's Witnesses. Clients of mine, of the writer, who allege they have been abused within the organization, describe a culture which is profoundly collusive with child abuse. It's hard enough for abused children to speak out in any setting in the Jehovah's Witnesses. It's bordering on the impossible. The organization is notorious for its 2-witness rule. Anyone who accuses an adult of abuse must have a cooperating witness. Since the vast majority of child abuse occurs in secret, the effect of this rule is to silence abuse victims. Moreover, if there is no cooperating witness, the complainant is often treated as having made a false accusation. And this leads to the complainant being disfellowshipped or ostracized by other witnesses. A terrifying prospect if, like most children growing up in the Jehovah's Witnesses, your entire family life revolves around them. In this way, victims say the culture of the Jehovah's Witness facilitates and protects abusers. 2 legal cases have opened a window into this culture. The cases involve the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society, the legal entity through which the Jehovah's Witnesses operate. And one case concerns the Watchtower Society's liability to pay damages to a proven victim of abuse. Now, the Watchtower Society sought to argue that its devolved structure means that it cannot be vicariously liable for the actions of its officials who abuse children. It's a variation of the argument advanced by the Catholic Church, which maintained for many years that priests were not employees and therefore the church could not be liable for their actions. Now I'm just going to hold there. Now it's interesting to note in Pennsylvania, the Catholic diocese lawyer, Matt Haverstick, is the same lawyer for Jehovah's Witnesses because Brumley, he's completely out of the picture. He was sued for lying in court. Interesting side note. We have some videos on that. Now, it goes on to say, so it's a variation of the argument that the Catholic Church uses, which maintained for many years that priests were not employees and therefore the church could not be liable for their actions. So this is what the Jehovah's Witness stance. This is how they're taking the same thing. So the Catholic Church's long-running battle to evade responsibility on that basis ended in failure in 2012. And the Watchtower Society's defense failed at first instance in 2015, and its attempt to take the case to the Court of Appeal was dismissed last month. Meanwhile, in 2014, in response to emergent allegations of child abuse, the Charity Commission instigated a statutory inquiry into the Watchtower Society's approach to safeguarding. Quite reasonably, the Commission wants to understand whether the Society or the Watchtower's trustees have fulfilled their safeguarding responsibilities under the charity law. Also, the Commission sought production of relevant documents rather than cooperate with the inquiry, as one would expect an organization with nothing to hide. The Watchtower applied for a judicial review at the High Court to try to abort the inquiry and resist the production order. The Watchtower argued, amongst other things, that the Charity Commission was interfering with the Watchtower's right of freedom of religion under Article 9 of the Human Rights Act by commencing an inquiry with a view to changing Jehovah's Witness religious practices. In other words, if the purpose of the Charity Commission inquiry was to ensure that the Watchtower is complying with secular safeguarding norms, this violates religious freedom. So that's what the Watchtower says. Yeah, we want to hide pedophilia in our church. And if you try to expose us, then you are violating the Freedom of Religious Act under Article 9 of the Human Rights, which they fought for. So, if on the outside, when you look at the Watchtower, how petty they are and how they keep fighting and fighting and fighting in court to hide what's going on in the religion. They don't want to change. Well, let's carry on. In March this year, the Watchtower Society lost its application for judicial review. Remember, this year, this was 2015, something like that. So, but as often seems to happen in English law, when an issue of serious social importance fails to be decided, the matter becomes bogged down in an obscure technical argument. On this occasion, about whether the Watchtower had pursued the correct legal avenue in seeking to challenge the Commission's decision. Can you imagine that? Over something like that, that's how they appealed it, the Watchtower. It says the Court of Appeal decided that it hadn't, and the Watchtower's subsequent attempt to pursue the matter to the Supreme Court also failed. So the underlying question, which comes first, religious freedom or the protection of children from abuse, will have to wait for another day. So here you have it. The Watchtower sidewalled the courts again here at this point in time, and they keep sidewalling the courts, putting excuses one after another. All the donated money you think that the witnesses have is going to pay for lawyers. And could this be why the Watchtower has increased its monthly requirement from all the publishers, is, in my opinion, to pay for some of the legal fees. So it goes on to say, following the Court of Appeal decision, the Charity Commission argued that the Watchtower Society engaged constructively with the inquiry. Anyone affected by safeguarding issues in the Jehovah's Witness should contact the Commission's lead investigator. A number of my clients are providing input into the inquiry. But the Society simply said that the Watchtower said it was looking at the ruling carefully and evaluating, or my words, evading, but they say they're evaluating where we can go next, but they're evading. So we can probably expect more attempts to stall the inquiry and resist proper scrutiny. But at least these court cases have had the beneficial side effect. They are raising public awareness both of the issue of child abuse in the Jehovah's Witnesses and the wider issue of religious organizations and churches pleading a religious justification for evading basic norms of child safeguarding. The Catholic Church, in Australia for example, but not in Britain, has successfully evaded being sued for clerical abuse for decades, on the ridiculous premise that it is not a legal entity, which has not stood in the way of its operating bank accounts or receiving legacies. And that's what the Watchtower did. They made the congregation not a charity. And they stuck the charities, the legal part of it, elsewhere, even into the international Bible students. So the Watchtower is very cagey, and they're doing the same thing that the Catholic Church has done. In Australia, hearings in the Royal Commission on Child Sex Abuse exposed the witnesses' culpability in protecting abusers in a devastating fashion. The Royal Commission heard that their safeguarding procedures were woefully deficient. Here, the independent inquiry into child sexual abuse, now chaired by Professor Alex Jay, needs to link with the Charity Commission inquiry and undertake a thorough investigation into culture and practices within the organization. So you know what that tells me, folks? All of the governments around the world are working together, and they're pulling all their information together about these religions. Jehovah's Witnesses are being named. They're one of the biggest ones in the news today. If I was a Jehovah's Witness, I would be embarrassed to be a Jehovah's Witness. I remember when I used to go to the door, and that was 2012. I wouldn't even want to tell people at the door I was a Jehovah's Witness because they would slam the door in my face. And you'd go to the door and you'd kind of pretend you were talking about the weather a lot of times and that you're a concerned neighbor. In fact, one of their presentations is, I'm a concerned neighbor and I'm at your door and I'm bringing an awareness to you about all of the world conditions and how things are going to change. You know how things are going to change? I bet you're wondering. And so the householder says, well, how? And then you say, well, it's in the Bible. And at this point in time, the householder's wondering, okay, are you Mormon? Are you JW? Who the hell are you? You see, and the JWs will not tell people that they're JWs because the whole world, it's a bad name. Jehovah is a bad, bad name in the world. So I wouldn't want that name. And I am so happy that I'm an ex-Jehovah's Witness. So the closing statement here, if the Jehovah's Witnesses imagine that they can escape scrutiny of their safeguarding failures, I am certain they will be proved wrong. The courts have certainly given them short shrift, but in exposing what has happened, we need to nail the central issue once and for all. Child protection is more important than religious expression. And religious organizations need to obey the law of the land just like everyone else. And when it comes to child abuse, religious exceptionalism needs to stop. And that's what we're shooting for here in Canada and the US, and I think all over the world. Now, the next article I'll go through quite quickly, but I'll leave links for these in the description. So this is the government their commitments on abuse may not go far enough. This is what this article is saying. And this goes back May of 2023. So I'll just go over it quickly. The NSS has put this forth, mandatory reporting, and that's what they want. They don't want anything hidden. So if someone tells an elder or a priest that they were molested, the priest or elder has to mandatorily report it to the police. And if they don't, it becomes a crime and they become liable. They become they become a criminal. So that's how they want it, is that if you don't report it, you become part of the crime, you become a criminal. And that's what will get everything reported. And therefore, the priests can't protect themselves any longer. Everyone's going to go to the police. So time limits. They want to get rid of the time limits for abuse, personal injury claims, and they want to be able to sue the organizations. So that's in the next one. But the time limits of 3 years is not long enough. It has to be. So they're saying they want that raised because it takes 22 years for an abused victim to actually come forth. So they, this in the U.S., I think it's being raised in some states to the age 50. So I think in Canada, I don't think there is any limitation on child sex abuse. So now the readdress scheme for victims and survivors. Well, this is where rather than the taxpayer paying for all of the rehabilitation, the organizations have to pay for it. The Catholic Church has to pay for it. The Watchtower has to pay for this stuff. And to date, they've been evading a lot of this stuff. So this is where we're on par with this, and we're fighting for the same thing here. And the NSS vice president, crucial that the law has no religious exemptions. So he says that we have long argued for a law to require the reporting of suspected CSA, so we welcome the government's commitment to the mandatory reporting regime. And it's crucial that such laws contain no exemption for faith-based settings, including disclosure in the confessional. So clergy penitent privilege, or the elders getting a confession. You see, today they can hide that under this Catholic Church clergy penitent privilege. And this is what has to stop all over the world. So this will help us to protect our children. And this is what we are also lobbying for here. So this is what they're lobbying for. This is what we're lobbying for. And we invite you to join the lobby. And there's my news intro. I forgot to take that off again. But we're going to get ready for the outro here, and we're going to close our program. We thank you for following through with us all the way through. And if you haven't yet had a chance to subscribe to our channel, we invite you to do so. It helps us to grow our channel, get it out to more people. And especially if you felt it was beneficial, then that's how YouTube, their algorithms work, and they get it out to other people. So thank you again for your support, and until next time, keep living your life with love. Bye for now.